Eagle Community Television presents Community Connection with your host, Mike Cooper.
Hello and welcome again to Community Connection from Eagle Community Television. Thanks for watching. Thanks to our producer, Jeff Durall. We're at the Plymouth School House, inside the schoolhouse, which is located on the campus of Fort Hays State University, right across from Tamanic Hall, and visiting with Anschutz Professor of Education, Dr. Paul Adams, who's going to be telling us about the one-room schoolhouse known as Plymouth School. Guess we ought to start, Dr. Adams, if we could, with Phi Delta Kappa. This is kind of their project. Talk about that group.
Well, Phi Delta Kappa is education honorary that education students, administrators were asked to join for academic excellence. And one of their missions is, of course, to do service to their community. And back about 1974 or 75, they decided that one of the missions they wanted to do was to preserve our educational heritage in Kansas. And so they made the project to disassemble, remove, and move to this campus, to this site, a one-room schoolhouse to recognize Fort Hays' role as originally the normal school, a branch campus of Emporia State, as our long-standing role in teacher education, and then remind people of where we came from as a state in Kansas.
And this schoolhouse actually built in 1874, and the project began on the campus, I guess, at 1975 for the diamond anniversary of the campus, the 75th anniversary, and the U.S. bicentennial. So basically, Phi Delta Kappa had the project, the schoolhouse recreated almost brick by brick, huh?
That's right. And the way they approached this is that they sent out through their newsletter and through community releases to say, hey, we're looking for as much of an intact one-room schoolhouse as we can find, and they're all over Kansas. If you look around, you see them. And one that also has the records of the students that were there. And so sorting through, and I've talked with some of the people that were actively involved with this time, and they said they'd spend weekends traveling all around the state of Kansas looking at schools, evaluating, looking at the records, until they finally decided on this one, which is it's Plymouth School House because it was Plymouth Township, but it was not too far from Wilson that they did. And they decided on this one partly because it was accessible. They could get the semi in that you had to load all the bricks up, and that they had school records, and we could easily, well, I say easily, but could move it to the campus and get it here. And so that's how they did it. But it took the folks involved in this spent a lot of time, very serious consideration of looking what would be the best representation of the one-room schoolhouse in Kansas.
And of course the limestone exterior, but interior, talk about some of the artifacts inside and their origins.
Well, and inside of here, they tried to recreate, and this part was crumbled up a little bit that came up, but they did a really good job of recreating it. So like the raised dais that we're on here gives, of course, a better look to find those little troublemakers in the back row. And this wood, though, comes from wood that probably from the turn of the century. It was actually taken from an opera house, and I'm not sure where it was, but an old opera house that was being taken down. So this wood wasn't bought at the lumber yard. It actually was part of that era and time. The other things that are here, of course, the walls would have been just kind of plain plaster, so we tried to recreate that. And the school desks that you see across here are actual school desks from one-room schoolhouses that are out there. They're a little mixed with what they have, but you notice they go from small for the youngest kids all the way up to where you'd have that very old student called an 8th grader, which was probably the end, or maybe those students who are, and as we've looked at the school records, students who may have been 40, 30, and 40 years old coming back to finish their education, just learning how to read and write. So it was a multi-age setup in the classroom set there. The boards here, the original schoolhouse here wouldn't have had the slate boards. They actually would have had painted black that you could write on. And on the artifacts we have on all the desks here are, of course, little slate tablets and some chalk and some old cloth that would have cleaned up, and quill pens would have been put here, and the whole works. So tried to do that.
It was interesting too. Nicholas Boyle, who is a senior at Fort Hays State University and the Plymouth School coordinator, was telling us that the tablets themselves have a different meaning to young people now when he talks about getting a tablet.
Yeah, it very much. When we bring kids in here, because this is, again, to honor what the people who put this together, it's open for tours and groups to come in, is that they are surprised when we give them a tablet and they write on them. In fact, they kind of have fun with a tablet. And it works out just about as well as, well, I won't say that. You can't Google anything, but we have books, library books that are collected from the era, and those, of course, we always take book donations in and look at them. But they have fun writing on them and using them. And with the tablets, the slate tablets we had, can't Google things, so they find out that books still do matter, and as they go through and do things.
Make an excellent reference to
Make an
don't they,
excellent
Dr.
reference.
Adams?
And one of the things with these, today in classrooms, teachers have whiteboards that they use to show students do work. And I point out, well, this is a black whiteboard as you look at it. But anyway, the idea is that some of the same technologies are what we're using. Just we've used it with whiteboards and erasable markers instead of tablets and chalk dust, so we trade off.
And in lighting, the lamps on the walls, possibly kerosene more than likely. Huh?
More than likely, that would have come up. Now we have the electrical here, but the wide open windows that you see here were intentional because for the most part, 1874 there wasn't much in the way of electricity, like nothing here came up, but these lights would have been there, and behind here there's actually another door that would have provided additional lighting, and would have been a door there that we've closed off. So it was all natural lighting, so you hope for the best. And central heating, there's back in the video, I'm sure they'll see.
That's the story we've got to get to
yeah.
here in just a moment. I did want to ask about the flag, though. Nick tells us that the flag is actually with the stars, the representation of where we would have been.
That's right.
In 75.
And yeah, and it's one of the questions we ask groups come in and say, tell us how many stars are there. And then when we tell them it's 37, they go, what? How can that be? And part of it is that it's not a flag that we see much of because post Civil War we had a lot. We started adding additional states, but it does represent where we were as a state and where the Union was as a state. And it's an interesting flag. Somebody comes look at it, it's offset. So that you do the counts, you get kind of off because everything's a little bit off. The rows don't actually, it's not rows and columns like we have with our 50 stars now.
One of the obviously hard to miss artifacts is the Potbelly Stove, which we think of probably in most schools, one-room schools.
Right.
This has quite a story behind it.
That's right. This Potbelly Stove, and I have seen pictures in a couple books of this, actually, of this place. It's like pioneer schools of Kansas, and you look and say, oh, that's our schoolhouse. But the Potbelly Stove that we have in here was actually donated by a couple from Wilson, Kansas. But its history is that it was also, if you watch the movie Paper Moon, which folks that had lived in Hayes for a while know that there were movie stars and a big movie here made about this. But one of the things in the general store scene was the big Potbelly wood burning, coal burning, whatever you want to burn type of stove. And it ended up here in the schoolhouse because the owners of the stove, they were made an offer by Peter Bamanovich to say, hey, I want to buy that stove. And the husband of the couple said, there's no way I'm going to let that stove go to Hollywood. And he called up the university and he said, you guys come get it tonight and it's yours. Because if my wife finds out, it's going to Hollywood. So we're very fortunate we have a Hollywood prop, our little touch to fame here at the schoolhouse.
And a massive stove, as
Very
well
much.
as being extremely heavy, I would assume.
Very heavy, and we didn't run all the duct pipe that would have gone up through the roof there, but you fill it up with coal or wood, and you may have in the pictures the back building there's actually a coal bin, wood bin that was there. And you'd heat it up in the morning, and it'd be a great place to be, but very hot and kind of cold up here because there's nothing to retain the heat overnight except at that time would have been two thick layers of limestone to keep this place warm and cool. So it's a unique thing to look at. And originally we had a stove expert actually come by and tell me this is like the Royal Oak, and they were made in Michigan and shipped all around the U.S. at that time. So it's really a beautiful piece of the workmanship from that era.
Well, now there are tours available for youth groups as well as individuals who want to come. Nick was telling us that He's open to tours a couple of times during the week for individuals
Right.
who want to just walk in, or school groups that want a tour. And one of the things that are given out, I understand you had kind of a design input on this, right? This is the little artifact that's given out here.
Yeah, and it's well, just a ruler. On the front, we have the Pledge of Allegiance and the logo for the schoolhouse, but on the back, we do have pictures of all the presidents that have come through, all the way to President Obama, and we do want people to visit because we'd like to use them up before the next election, because we know we're going to get a new president in the next election because of the terms.
Inches and
Inches
metric
and metric.
centimeter.
Well, and in my background being in science, I insisted on the metric measure.
Absolutely.
But very nice, and of course it has our website connection, and we do the Pledge of Allegiance, even though the Pledge of Allegiance wasn't around at the time of the schoolhouse, but we always do it with the kids to get them to experience the putting up the flag and talking about the role of citizenship and even the role of the schoolhouse as being a good citizen.
A couple of things before we wrap up today, Paul, and one of those is the central part of the school. Usually that was one of the 2 or 3 first things
Right.
that a community would do, would be build a schoolhouse.
Well, that's right. And when we did the westward expansion, of course, go back to our history books, we know that they set aside part of the township, a little section had to be used to support the school, whether that was selling the products there to pay for a school or using that space, kind of up to the township leadership. But the schoolhouse was very much a central part of the community. For this, for example, in this schoolhouse, it educated students, and I say they went through the equivalent of what we would call 8th grade, maybe 6th grade would be all, but it was there for anybody to come back, because when we look at the records, we find that people who needed education on the basics of math or reading, they could come back even at the age of 40 and be a student here. And so it meant that the education was valued so much, not just for the kids, but for the community. The schoolhouse itself as a facility, it was a major investment. I mean, you look at this one on the outside, and you can still see the marks where the colony, and that's the way we refer to it, the colony of people that live there, they actually were the stonemasons who went and broke this stone to build it, because that's how much this community meant to them and their children. But then what else is the schoolhouse used for? Well, one of the things was that it could have been used early on before a fully established church would be a place for Sunday meetings for a church. Could have been used as a social center, much as we do with our schools now. You know, you can always check them out and use them however you want. Or it would be a place for continued intellectual enlightenment. There was the Lyceum programs where once a month somebody would come up and say, let's talk about the issues of the day. And as we look even back in the 1800s, one of them was, should the primary language of the United States be English? Which is a debate we still have, but it was a concern then because of the large immigration that was coming in. And people would come in and engage in that process. And I think that was a big piece of this. And you know, leadership in the community to keep a school functioning, to pay the bills and all that, many of the same things that we still do today. But without this as an anchor for the community, people would tend to drift, because it would draw from a large township they'd come in, and it kept people socially active, engaged, mentally engaged, and also just preparing youth and adults for what they needed to be successful in life.
And from the year 1874, when the Plymouth School House was built, public education has always been very important.
Very important. And Kansas, what's interesting for people, and I've driven around different places in Kansas, as you drive around, there's a one-room schoolhouse, and go further in the country, and there's another, is that we had these schools all over the state. And you know, when Kansas was formed, education was extremely valuable to the state.
Dr. Paul Adams, Anschutz Professor of Education from the Plymouth School House and our Community Connection. Thanks for watching.